Well, good day to you. It is July the 8th, and I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you happen to be. Now, if you are new to this channel, welcome. My name is Gary Willing. If you have listened to a video or two before, welcome back. Now, what do we talk about on this channel? Well, we talk about the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. We talk about why is the teacher, along with this group of masters, coming back into the everyday world now. Why is it important that they're doing it at this particular time? And of course, what does it mean for you and everyone else that they're doing this? Now, I like to extend the opportunity to you or whoever else is listening, the opportunity to ask a question about this. And the best way to do it is to post your question as a comment in the comment section of this video or any of the other videos I put up. You can also email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. You can also answer your own questions. If you look in the description of each and every one of the videos I put up over the years that I've been doing this, you can see links that can give you background information, not only about the emergence of this teacher, Maitreya. It can give you background information about the miracles that we talk about. You can see images of some of these miracles like weeping icons, the Hindu milk miracle, the Norwegian spiral. You can see videos about healing waters and so forth like that. You can see videos where people are talking about UFO sightings. You can see images of newly formed crop patterns that happen every year on cropcircleconnector.net. You can even do some research about the environment and so forth by some of these links. So it will give you some background information that I can't give really in a 15, 20, 30-minute video every time. So hopefully you'll take the time to do it. It doesn't cost you anything to look at those links, just perhaps a little bit of time. And if you look at it and you see that there might be some truth to it, well then great. Come on back, let's talk, let's ask some more questions and learn to know about it. If you see that perhaps it's not for you, then it's not for you. No big deal, no harm, no foul. We can still be friends. But anyway, hopefully you will take the time to investigate this for yourself. Now, I do like to say this, and I think this video that I'm going to put up today and is really a true testament to this, but this information really doesn't have anything to do with religion. I get asked it a lot. I get questions about religion all the time. I get comments put up there all the time based on people's religious and ideological views. But this information really, if you investigate it for yourself, you'll see as I see that it really doesn't have anything to do with religion. And therefore, it's not my intention to get you to change your particular religious belief. Now, it's about the crises that are facing humanity and the problems and the solutions that we can do to get it done. And is there hope to get it done, in time? That's what this information is about. You don't have to believe everything that I believe in order for this information to have some value and use for you. You don't have to believe or that who I believe Maitreya to be in order to act and do something about it to help us all pull back from the edge. We can all do something. In fact, it's going to be for all of us to do something, whether we're a Christian, atheist, Buddhist, Muslim, or whatever, because the truth of the matter is, whether we like it or not, we are all one. And there's evidence to prove that we are one. And if you go back and read some of the comment sections in these videos when people, they're demanding proof about what I talk about with Maitreya. I've had experiences with Maitreya. I believe it 100% based off of that. Also, the quality of the information. When I started to do research after initially being turned off on this information like you might be, I found it to be 100% true for myself eventually. It took time, but eventually I did, which is why I put these videos up the way that I do. But people ask me for proof all the time. And really, I can't give you any proof, and it's not for me to give proof even if I could. The only evidence that I can give you 3 pieces of evidence that I think prove the importance of this story. The first one is that the proof that we are one. And there's 2 pieces of evidence that prove that. The first one are the miracles that are going on. And if you investigate it and you look at the Share International website, you look at Crop Circle Connector perhaps, and some of these other links that I have in there, you'll see that what I'm saying is true. These miracles or these strange phenomena have been going on for decades. They've been happening to people on every single religious faith and people of no particular religious faith. Now, they're also giving people a more uplifted view of the future, a greater sense of hope, healings in a lot of cases. So they are hope for humankind. And it is true to say after you research this the way that I do, because you'll see that they're happening to every person of every religious faith and people of no particular faith, that the hope for mankind is for all of mankind, which is a way of saying that we're one. Now, what we're going to talk about today are the problems that are facing humanity. This, I think, are real. I think they're dangerous. I do think they affect each and every one of us, whether we want it, like it or not, whether we believe it or not. These problems are affecting us. And wherever we are, no matter how much money we have, what the color of our skin is, that kind of stuff, whatever language we speak, these problems are affecting us, each and every one of us. So, but I do think when we do finally get through it, and I do think we will conquer these problems because they're there for us to conquer, we can do it, that when we look back on it, we will see that these problems are probably our greatest teachers, and because they're teaching us that we are one. And eventually humanity will have to wake up to the truth that we are one, that truth that exists within the hearts in each and every one of us without exception, in order to tackle the problems. So these problems are affecting each and every one of us. It's for each and every one of us to do something about it. But then when we finally realize that if we don't, it's going to be problematic for each and every one of us in a very real sense, we'll eventually wake up to the fact that we got to do something about it, which will help us manifest unity on this planet. That's why I think these problems are our greatest teachers, really. Now, here's the thing. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the problems that are facing humanity, like the environment and so forth. And I know I said I was going to offer 3 pieces of evidence, and the third piece of evidence I'll give you later in the talk. But anyway, so when it comes to like the environment, right? We got pollution that we can see, and we got pollution that we can't see. We have climate change and those kind of things. And so it's affecting each and every one of us. But one thing that I want to ask you is, you might have seen this like I have. Now, when I ask people how they're doing, and I see people on my job that I don't know, they're just strangers in my job, and hey, how you doing? I've been finding more and more that people have been saying their general response is, I'm tired. And it doesn't matter what day or time of day that I ask them how they're doing, I'm tired. And it doesn't look like they're out partying all night, and that's the reason why they're tired in the morning time or whatever like that. Or they're working that hard, that's why they're tired. It just seems like people are just tired. They're tired emotionally, they're tired mentally, and of course physically they're being drained. I think the physical aspect's coming from the environment. Our food that we eat is not clean. The water that we drink is not clean. The air that we breathe is heavily polluted. And there's pollution that we can see, that it would be very easy for us to solve it, but we're not, but like for instance, none of us really go down to the local river and just pull all the water that we drink out of that river every day, right? It needs to be purified. And it takes a lot of energy just to purify the water that's dirty, right? But yet our air is just as dirty as the water that we drink, and it's not really purified, right? So we get sick that way. Now, there's also probably more dangerous pollution that we don't see, and that Maitreya and these masters will start to address once they are more speaking with a greater sense of urgency about the problems and so forth, is the invisible peril of nuclear radiation. And according to them, the pollution that each and every nuclear reactor, nuclear storage site, nuclear missile, that's storing that plutonium or whatever, it's creating this pollution that's affecting our health. And the pollution is so fine, it's almost nearly microscopic, that it can go right through lead, right through the tiny microscopic cracks in the concrete and go right out into the atmosphere. And it's such of a light vibration that it goes way high up into the atmosphere, and then eventually is picked up by air currents, and then eventually starts to fall back to the ground, and it gets picked up by clouds, and it gets into the rain, and it gets right into the food chain and everything like this. And that's what's making us sick more than anything. And our scientists are telling us that it's safe because they believe it's safe, but it isn't safe. It's quite unsafe, right? And then you got other problems that I think are affecting us emotionally and mentally, like social injustice, the political divisions, hearing those constant bickering going back and forth between right and left politics, and nothing's getting done, right? And then you have, economic uncertainty for a lot of people, and a lot of people are living in extreme poverty. Even some are starving to death, and that's all affecting us. We're living in a very unstable, violent, dirty world. But it doesn't have to be like that. We have the ability to change this, and that's why these masters are coming back now. Because if they don't, it's going to be perilous and the end for all of us if we're not careful. So that's why they're coming back to help us at this time. But we have to act. We have to do something about it. Now, the most important thing, if you ask yourself, well, what would Maitreya say would be the most important thing that we need to do? Well, he would say that we as a people need to create peace. Now, by saying that, whatever reaction you had to me saying that depends on probably where you live, right? You might not think that it's even possible. You might think it's too utopian. You might think, well, maybe it's possible, but how would we get there? You know what I mean? You might say, I don't really care about peace. Whatever it is. Now, Maitreya would say it is the most important thing that we can do. Now, there's two reasons why it's important. The first is the less likely but more obvious. The second is the more obvious but less likely, okay? Or the other way around. That'd be the first thing I'm going to talk about. The most obvious but less likely is the fact that if we don't create peace, any war, any skirmish, any battle could escalate up to a nuclear war, right? And there's skirmishes and little battles going on all around the world on a daily basis. Within countries, within tiny little areas of countries even. And a lot of them don't even make the news, right? But if it escalated enough, it could get to the point where other nations are involved. And there are a lot of nations that have nuclear weapons, and they could be used in that battle. And then it could be bad for everybody. And then according to Maitreya, it doesn't matter where you live. If it's a nuclear holocaust, it's wiping everybody out. So that is, I think, the most obvious reason why peace is important, but it's the less likely, actually. I don't think that we'll ever really get to that point. Now, the less obvious but more likely is the environment. Nations have to trust one another in order to solve the environmental problem. Now, it leads the question, how do we get there? If we do believe that peace is necessary, what do we need to do to get there? Well, Maitreya would say the steps are very simple. Without sharing, there could be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. And without peace, there could be no future. That's what he says are the steps to peace. Now, before I talk about the principle of sharing, I want to read an article by one of these masters. It's entitled The Need for Action. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read a few paragraphs of it that I think are pertinent to what we're talking about. Now, these articles were published in Share International on a monthly basis. They were Benjamin Creme, who was the first person to come out and talk about the emergence of the teacher back in the 70s and did lectures all over the world, wrote books, published these articles, for instance, in Share International, claimed that his master gave this article to him telepathically. Now, you don't have to believe that to see value in this. You don't have to believe that to see that we all need to act. Just hear it for the words, see if it's true for you or not, and then if you do see it as true, do something about it, right? So, and then we're going to talk about why and how I think sharing is going to bring about peace. Okay, so, the need for action. Many times before I have spoken of the need for action to realize man's plans and dreams for a better life for all. As Maitreya says, quote, nothing happens by itself. Man must act and implement his will, unquote. With this in mind, let us look to the problems which most demand attention and seek to throw some light on their solution. The major problem awaiting solution is that of achieving just and lasting peace. Without peace today, there would be no future for the race. The nations even now are edging slowly towards this goal, but certain basic requirements must be met before real peace can be assured. Firstly, true peace depends on trust. Listen to that. Firstly, true peace depends on trust. It's very important. We're going to talk about that in a second. Which arises only when the law of justice is fulfilled. The great and widening gap between the lifestyles of the rich and poor nationally and between the nations is today the greatest block to the achievement of peace. Divergent ideologies play their divisive part, but this factor is diminishing in potency. More important by far is the ingrained complacency and greed of the developed world. Peace results from balance, whose absence guarantees conflict and war. The achievement of balance requires the recognition that all are independent peoples and nations, and that the needs of all can be met by just sharing. Until that realization dawns and is followed by action, we shall know an unstable world. While half the world goes hungry and millions yearly starve, true peace remains a dream. Now, the reason why trust is so important, okay, and this is my third piece of evidence for you. Does sharing really bring about peace? Yes, there is historical evidence that proves what the teacher's saying is true. Okay, now you might not look at it like this, but if you do your investigation and look at it from this standpoint, you might see what I see. Right after World War II, with the Marshall Plan, the United States instituted this plan called the Marshall Plan, where they wanted to help Western Europe out. And they did it by giving excesses of what they had to Western Europe. Western Europe then turned around and gave excesses back as payment of what they initially took. It's called the Marshall Plan. Now, when you investigate about the Marshall Plan, you'll come across historians that believe that it was the intention of the Marshall Plan was to use the foreign policy, this Pax Americana kind of foreign policy, to stop the spread of communism in Europe. And that might have been a lot of their intentions. It might have been all of their intentions. I don't know. And it really doesn't matter because irregardless of their intentions, they did for a time do the principle of sharing in a regional way, what Maitreya is advocating we do globally. Now, if you look at the end result of it, it stabilized Europe. The nations started to rebuild themselves. It created more of a just situation amongst those nations. And even now, after it's been ended for 70 or so years, those nations, trust one another better than any other nations on the planet. They solve their problems peacefully. Historically, before the Marshall Plan, Europe was not necessarily the most peaceful continent on the planet. And a lot of those nations were at war with one another. The same nations that you would consider to be peaceful nations toward one another now, like Germany and France, France and England, Italy and every other nation, United States and those nations. I mean, those nations were at war with one another for 2 decades prior to this. And then for centuries, they were always battling each other. Since then, there hasn't been. You see, it did create peace. Now, like I was saying before, we need peace. We need to trust each other in order to solve things like the environment. Now, to address the elephant in the room, the concern that people have when they hear about the principle of sharing, especially when they're coming from the United States. My experience has been when I've talked with people about the principle of sharing, their initial reaction here in the United States is, oh my God, that's like socialism, right? That's communism. They don't even ask. They just tell me that's socialism, right? Or they might think that the government is going to somehow find a way to either heavily tax people for it or outright go into your bank account and steal money out of your bank account and give it to somebody else. That's sharing. Well, and they don't want that. Well, I don't want that either, but thankfully that's not what they're talking about. In fact, I'll even put it to you like this. Based on what the teacher's saying about the principle of sharing, bringing about justice, bringing about peace, in the way that he's saying it, like the Marshall Plan, but doing it globally, okay? If you follow this. Even if every man, woman, and child gave money to other men, women, and child to help them, right? That would in and of itself would not bring about just, true, lasting peace. The only way to do it is for nations to give of their resources to other nations. That's the only way to do it. And as nice as it would be for corporations and people to give give a large percentage of their money to help other people out, that in and of itself would not bring about peace. It's got to start with the nations. So rest assured, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the fact that every nation has needs, every nation has excesses. Some nations have greater needs and excesses. But every nation has something to give. Even countries like the United States have needs, and there's another nation out there that can fulfill that need because they have the excess for it. And so it can be done like that. That in and of itself is going to bring about the trust and the justice that we need to bring about peace. Now, it doesn't have to be a perfect peace in order to solve the environment. I don't think we have enough time to create perfect peace in order to solve the environment, but we have to start to learn to trust one another enough to put aside the competition in order to solve that massive problem. That's why I think it's important. You see what I'm saying? So again, this has nothing to do with changing your ideology. It's about looking at this information about the problems, hopefully doing your own research, educating yourself on it, and then hopefully helping to put it into practice and helping to manifest it globally. Now, I'm going to say this too, because they were talking about until that realization dawns and is followed by action, we shall know an unstable world. Somebody had cynically asked a question, and I'm paraphrasing it because I don't have it written in front of me, a few videos ago, and I tried to answer it, I think, in the last video, about, what's going to motivate humanity, right, to even do anything? Because right now there's so much greed and corruption. He even talked about it. He said, the most important by far is the ingrained complacency and greed of the developed world. They see the same thing too. They don't see it cynically like we do, right? We would say, that's never going to get done because of the greed and the complacency. The malaise of the United States and the people in the United States and around the world in these developed countries. That's the problem. And it is the problem. But what's going to wake us up? And here's where I want to leave us. I want to leave us on a hopeful point about this. Is the hope for mankind is the fact that we have within our hearts the truth that we are one, the longing for peace, the longing for sharing, the longing that everybody has enough to live. We don't really ultimately, in our heart of hearts, want to compete with one another and be afraid of one another. And so Maitreya, it's been said, will be the galvanizing force for that, because within his heart is that truth too. And he's able to embody that truth, not even just manifest it. And the more he speaks on TV, the more he starts to wake our own hearts up to that truth. And we will start to see it more and more and more. I know it sounds utopian, I know it sounds crazy, but this is where this information fits into it. This is why it's so important that the teacher is speaking to us on TV. But it's not important that we know who, by what name he's using. It's more important about the fact that we just listen. Let our hearts open up to it, see the truth in it for ourselves, and do something about it. He says over and over again that it's for humanity to do. He's just trying to wake us up to it. But like the Buddha said 2,500 years ago, that he will inspire and galvanize humanity to build a brilliant golden civilization based on righteousness and truth. That righteousness and truth is the oneness of humanity. So thanks for listening. Have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you again in future videos. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.